Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Mosaic podcast. I have been so caught up with doing an adventure. And I think I told this to Nick when I met him when we had in our initial conversation. But it's an adventure inspired by him. Here's a man who lives in Sydney, Australia. And for those of you who think your voice doesn't matter, I read about this thing that he was doing, and I said, I got to have him on my podcast. But even more than that, I said, I want to do something like what he's doing. You're going to hear all about that in the show that we have in front of us. But let me give you a little background so he doesn't come in blind to you like he did to me. I know Nick all of about 14 minutes. All right. But Nick's an ex-journalist who now owns a content marketing agency called Hunter and Scribe. When Nick isn't working ridiculously long hours, he spends his time reading, writing, watching sport, meeting strangers, and dreaming about traveling the world. Nick lives in Sydney, Australia, which we already told you. But here's the thing that intoxicated me. I read about this project that he had created called 500 Lunches. Hashtag 500 Lunches, for those of you who want to read more about it. Nick's in the process of having lunch with 500 strangers over a 5-year period of time. He started his quest in August 2019 and has already met more than 100 strangers. He's going fast, man. That's fast. Nick is doing these 500 lunches so he can grow his network, improve his social skills, and sharpen his mindset. To learn more about it, you can go to www.500lunches.net. He's on LinkedIn. We're going to show that to you. His content marketing agency is hunterandscribe.com. And his email is nick@hunterandscribe.com. All of that's in the show notes. Don't go fretting yourself about doing that. Nick, it is such an honor to have a conversation with you. I wish we had thought to have lunch together because I could have been one of your guys.
Well, thank you so much, Danny, for having me. And mate, next time you're in Sydney, let's do lunch, my shout.
I would love that, my friend. I would love that. I normally start out entirely different, but because we're limited, because we have this awkward thing where we have two Nicks here, for those of you who are seeing. One is his picture and one is his voice. We only have 40 minutes, so let's just get right into it. What in the heck inspired you to go with something as crazy as having 500 lunches with 500 people?
Well, I stole the idea, Danny, of a wonderful woman.
Yes, you stole it too. I felt bad until that moment. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I stole it off a wonderful woman in Melbourne named Kaylee Chu. Kaylee had lunch with 100 strangers in 2018, and she released a book in the middle of 2019 called, wait for it, 100 Lunches with Strangers. And I bought a copy of the book, Danny, and I was so inspired, I thought, I need to do the same thing, although because I'm a bit of a show-off, I decided to have 500 lunches rather than 100. And this wonderful woman, Kaylee Chu, she was my very first lunch. So on August 27, 2019, I flew from Sydney to Melbourne. I had lunch, and then I got on a plane and I flew home.
Wow. Now that's a commitment to lunch, my friend.
Yeah, it was a really nice meal.
I hope so. I hope so. Well, one of these days, I hope to meet Kaylee Chu because I want to know who she stole this idea from. If she's not, did she steal it from someone?
No, Kaylee thought of the idea herself, and she totally transformed during her 100 lunches. At the start, she had a lot of social anxiety, especially when she was talking to people who weren't Asian. Kaylee's from Hong Kong originally, but by the end, she was a very confident communicator. She built a great network. She was getting all these opportunities. And the person I met in August last year, and who's now my friend, I didn't recognize that socially anxious person, Danny, because all I saw was a very confident, well-spoken person.
Wow. I love that. So you inspired me to have 50 conversations with 50 strangers. And I thought that romantically it would take me 50 days to do that I would have a conversation a day. And over the course of 2 months, that would happen. Well, I put out a post in a Facebook group that I'm a part of, and I got inundated. I got like 65 responses. And I've been having 5 to 6 to 8 conversations a day. I'll be done with it in 2 weeks. And what I'm learning from it is so beautiful that I'm just going to continue to do it. So somewhere around 250, I might meet you on some dock in some distant town, and we can decide to have a conversation and a lunch together and be part of each other's work somewhere. I'm teasing you. Uh,
That would be wonderful, Danny.
tell me tell me about you. Tell me, like, what is it about you that made you want to have 500 lunches with 500 strangers? I know you
Well,
said it's about building your network. I know you said it's about improving your social skills. I know what you said about sharpening your mindset. But there's so many ways to do that. What made you choose this way?
um, I think it was the fact that it's a bit of an adventure. And I think also it's the fact, Danny, that it's a bit different because I tend to do things differently. I think that appealed to me also.
Is this from your content marketing point of view that you look at how do you make an impact? How do you do something different? What do you mean when you say you tend to do things differently?
Well, all my life, I've noticed that I've been unconventional and I've never had a problem with that. In fact, I've kind of liked it. And I just, without trying, Danny, I tend to think differently to most people. And funnily enough, with this 500 lunches thing, so I've had 107 lunches now, and I absolutely love the process, but I find it almost mundane. So, there's a stranger, I'll contact the stranger. Do you want to have lunch? This person might say yes, they might say no. If they say no, I'll just ask someone else. If they say yes, we'll have lunch. To me, it's kind of mundane, but when people hear about it, they find it extraordinary, which I'm still coming to terms with. To me, it just seems like a kind of mundane thing. But I guess this gets back to the point I was making earlier, that I just seem to think differently to most people. And I think maybe that's one of the things that attracted me to this.
So did it seem mundane to Miss Chu also because you found it amazing when she did it? You must have found it amazing enough to want to repeat it. Did she find it mundane also?
Do you mean her 100 lunches or my 500 lunches?
Her 100 lunches.
Well, no, to her, it was extraordinary because she had this tremendous social anxiety, and her first 10 lunches or so were excruciating because she found it so hard to converse with these people. And she really had to force herself to continue. So for her, it wasn't mundane. It was almost a form of torture, at least to start with.
And so what I'm trying to get at is how can something that other people find is so exquisite? Like I heard about it and I was intoxicated by it. I thought, what a beautiful thing. Because in the world we live in now, like I have no ulterior motive. I'm not trying to network with them. I'm not trying to find anything. I'm not trying to do business with them. I don't know if you are or not. That doesn't matter. All I'm wanting to do is give people a chance to have a voice, to give people a chance to say to the world what they want to say, because I don't believe people get much of a chance to say things. And in the conversations, the things that are coming out, many of which are the same, but I have like a lightning round that I do of are you this, are you that, what do you do? And I have questions that I ask. And it's normally kept within half an hour or 45 minutes. Today I did one this morning, and it was the first time I've had like 47 of the conversations already. It was the first time, every time I asked her a question, she said back to me, and what about you? What do you think?
Hmm.
It was really interesting because I always tell people I'm just holding the space. Like this is for you to be able to share your thing. And she said, yeah, but I could never imagine having a conversation where I'm just talking and I'm not asking you what you think. And it was such an enriching conversation. It was really interesting and beautiful. What have you found has been the most surprising thing that you've found in having 107 lunches with people you don't know?
Well, one thing that has surprised me, Danny, and I've come to terms with it, is that probably 95% of my invitations get rejected. And the reason it surprised me is because when I heard what Kaylee Chu had done, I thought, wow, this is incredible. And so if someone invited me, I'd be like, yeah, okay, this guy Danny wants to have lunch with me. I don't know who he is, but sounds great. I've been surprised that the people I contact, for whatever reason, aren't that keen on the idea, and I don't hold it against them. I'm sure they have good reasons for not wanting to meet a stranger. That, though, has been a surprise, that there are a lot of people out there who just want to keep going along the usual path, and for whatever reason don't want to try something new.
Would you say in general you're a risk taker or not a risk taker?
I would say not a risk taker.
Not a risk taker. Did you see me fall off my stool right there?
I'm reasonably conservative when I say conservative, I don't mean in a political sense, but I mean in the sense that I try to play the percentages. So no, I wouldn't say I'm a risk taker.
Wow. So how does again, I'm just enamored by this. How does someone who is not a risk taker take the biggest risk ever of inviting somebody to lunch knowing that 90% of the time he's going to be rejected? How many calls have you had to make to get 107 yeses?
Well, I haven't made any calls. I just send private messages, usually through
Okay.
LinkedIn. Sometimes I'll send an email. So it would be, I think, over 1,000 people who I've contacted.
And have
And
people contacted you back or just let it die in the sand?
I've only had 3 people contact me to say no. All the others just don't reply.
So you don't know. You could have a barrage of people that say, I just read your post in LinkedIn and it got buried somewhere and I didn't, we weren't friends or something. And so I never saw it. And I would love to have that happen. You might have 10,000 lunches coming up if you keep going at it.
But possibly, I don't rule that out.
Are you filming these lunches?
No, no filming. I always get a photo with the person I'm having lunch with, but no video.
Do you have anything that you want to, do you have a plan? Like when with me, I wrote this book called oh, it's over here, I guess. I never know on a green screen
Behind your left
where my
shoulder.
book is. Yeah. But my left shoulder is over here. Yeah, I guess it is over here. That's right. So I got to go like that. It's my left shoulder. That would always, I keep thinking it's over here. There it is over there. Okay. um, I initially, when I wrote this book, The Mosaic, which is a story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And he asks the adults where his parents are, and they tell him they're in a place called heaven. So he sets out in search of the place called heaven. And he's just a boy. He has no idea where heaven is, or he doesn't know if it's a store, a restaurant, a place. He doesn't know where he's going to end up. But he believes the people he meets are going to be able to tell him. But the people he meets are not the standard bearers of people that would introduce you to heaven. They're not the rabbis and the priests and the ministers and the gurus and the shamans and all that stuff. They're the road worker and the homeless man. They're the juice man and the blind woman. They are the simple, ordinary people that are doing the simple, ordinary things. And he wonders, why in the world am I meeting these people? And he just says, you know what? You're here with them. Why don't you just, for whatever reason, you're here. These are the people you're meeting. Just sit and start to talk with them and just listen to what they have to say. Nick, in 100% of the cases, every single person he talks to shows him that the person he originally thought they were is not at all who they are. Listening to him for 5 or 10 minutes, he sees an entirely different person. And it makes him think because it happens every single time. He wonders if, do I see anything the way it is? Or do I see everything the way I am? And so at that moment, he looks to the right and he sees a monk unzipping the sky and inviting him to walk through this parallel reality where he meets the wise one who is the keeper of the mosaic. I'll leave that as the trailer for anybody listening. If they want to get the book, I'd love them to get it and hear their thoughts. But part of the reason why it intrigues me so much is because in this world that we live in, I don't know how it is in Australia, but certainly in America, we are going through a civil war of thought. There is so much disagreement, so much tension, so many people, one side versus another, when we were never meant to live on sides. We were meant to congregate in the middle of the things, but we're so far apart. And I've had beautiful conversations because of you, because what you inspired me to do, which, and I thank you so much for it, with people that don't agree with one thing that I say. But because we took the risk to take the conversation and have it, we find something that we agree on. And they think they could be a conservative, gun-toting, far right person, and I might be a hippie, liberal loving, whatever I am. Who knows? Um, but somehow, when we come together, there's something that we touch that's deeper than those superficial differences. And I find that the world needs conversation. That when we have those types of conversations, we suddenly understand each other much better, much deeper, much fuller. Are you finding that in your conversations, or do they tend to stay business driven? Where do your conversations go? What do you talk about? What are the questions you ask?
Initially, for the first few minutes, as we're getting to know each other, Danny, where the conversation tends to be superficial. What do you do? Where do you work? Where do you live? But for almost all the 107 lunches I've had, they've gotten quite deep and personal, and there's really been a strong connection with a lot of these people. And so we tend to talk about, I guess, life, about our goals, about our fears, about family, about relationships. They tend to be really meaningful conversations.
Without diverging anybody's point of view, because that's not none of my business. Are there certain trends that are emerging? Are there certain things that people are scared of across the board, or is everybody have a different fear?
Uh, Look, I would say one thing that comes up, and I always knew this before, but it's really been brought home to me that we've all got insecurities, Danny, and they differ from person to person, but we've all got insecurities. And I've had lunch with some incredibly smart, incredibly successful people, and you see the insecurities in them too.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's one insecurity in common. Differs from person to person, but you'd be surprised just how insecure some incredibly smart and successful people just can be.
Did any of your lunches sort of skid down a scary road? Either because people thought you were hitting on them or were hitting on you, or because they were wanting something from you, or because the male or female, they were trying to pick you up. Because you never know. Like I grew up when there were dinosaurs, because I'm an old man already, right? But we grew up with a standard agreement. You do not talk to strangers, right? And now in the world that we live in, there's so many things that are happening. So many people that get accused of doing all sorts of things. What's been the scariest thing that's happened in one of the lunches that you've had, if there's been anything?
There hasn't been anything scary. To kind of go back to your earlier question, Danny, no one's tried to pick anyone up. The only the 107 lunches I've had, there's only been one person who's made me feel uncomfortable. I don't know if this was in my head or not, but I had a feeling she was trying to get something out of me during the lunch. She didn't ask me for anything during the lunch. She hasn't asked me for anything since. So it may have been my imagination. I felt a bit uncomfortable with her, but with the other 106 people, we've gotten on so well, and it's just been entirely pleasant. There hasn't been any discomfort, and there hasn't been any fear.
Have conversations continued, or have they pretty much just, that was a lunch and it's over, and that was the agreement?
Okay. Now that is a great question. I mentioned at the start that one of the reasons I'm doing this is to grow my network, and I'm meeting some really high value people. So I want to keep in touch with these people. And so I'm making a point of doing something to maintain a relationship at least every 3 months. So it might be I'm phoning them, texting them, emailing them, interacting with them on social media. It might be that I'm suggesting another meeting, a lunch or a coffee. For example, later this week, I've got lunches with 2 people I've already had lunch with. We're going to catch up again. And so partly for the sake of my network, I'm deliberately maintaining contact with these people, but then also quite a few of these people have now become good friends of mine. So
Wow.
without any deliberate attempt on my part, I'm maintaining contact. So a couple of the people I've actually met half a dozen times since in the 9 or 10 months since.
Wow, that's fabulous. And in a networking meeting, one of the things that people ask a lot, I'm not a big networking guy because I don't like the whole, scene. But in networking meetings that I've gone, people will tell me what they do, and then if I'm not interested, they'll say, "Do you know anybody that might be interested in it?" Do you do any of that at your lunches? Do you say to people, "Do you have anybody else that you would recommend that I would have lunch with?"
Yes, I do sometimes ask that, and I've been referred to some wonderful people. I never tried to turn any of these people into clients. Some of the people I meet are people who could potentially be clients, but I never tried to get money out of them. And then I'm meeting a lot of people who could never be clients just because they work in completely foreign fields to me. But it's interesting that the referrals I've gotten have been with some really great people, and because they're referred, these people almost always say yes to me. So for example, I had lunch a few weeks ago with one of the greatest female soccer players in Australian history.
Wow.
And people in Australia would know her. Her name is Joey Peters, and she's in the Australian Hall of Fame. But if I just contacted Joey out of the blue, I'm sure she wouldn't have said yes. But because I was referred to her by one of my previous lunch companions, then she did say yes.
That's fabulous. So a lot of what you're seeing, you're confirming to be things that seems like it would be something you would know. Like it would make a lot of sense that if someone refers you to someone, the propensity for them to say yes over a cold call is probably way higher, right?
Exactly.
What are you finding that completely surprises you? Is there a certain type of person that says yes? Is there a certain type of, you don't really know the people that say no, but but are there qualities and characteristics of the people that say yes that
Absolutely.
make them
Yes, there is that.
identifiable?
Yes. Okay. So that is such a great question. So about 95% of people who I invite, they reject me. Now, in the invitation that I send, Danny, I never try to talk any of these people into the idea. I just say, I'm having lunch with strangers, 500 in 5 years. Do you want to have lunch with me? And that's basically it. I've noticed that the people who say yes are more positive, more open-minded, more proactive than the average person. And I've also noticed that the people who say yes are happier and more successful than the average person. And I don't think those things are coincidental. I think the reason these people are happier and more successful, Danny, is because they're more positive and more proactive and open-minded. So funnily enough, the fact that all these people are rejecting me has turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because the people I'm having lunch with are the cream of the crop.
Wow. Have you ever thought about recrafting your letter and sending it back to the people that have said no to you and seeing it, doing like an A/B test on it and seeing if if there just wasn't enough in your letter to make someone say yes?
No, that I haven't thought about that. It did occur to me at the start that maybe I should try to persuade people to have the lunches, but then as soon as I thought of that idea, I thought, no, Nick, don't do that, because
That's swarmy.
if I have to cajole them into it, they're going to feel it's like a trip to the dentist.
Right.
And then how enjoyable is that lunch going to be? I want them to wholeheartedly commit to the idea.
Yeah. And I get that. And for the most part, people do what everybody else is doing, right? So if someone initially would say no, if 1,000 people, if they knew that 1,000 people that you invited said yes to you, they might rethink their no and say, well, God, then it's safe enough for me to do that now. And it wouldn't be you cajoling them into it or convincing them, but it might just be holding a safe enough space for them to feel comfortable. It would be interesting to see if those demos were the same as the ones that just said yes without knowing anything.
That's a really good point, Danny, because this goes back to the psychological concept of social proof. As humans, we want to do the correct thing, and often we don't know what the correct thing is, so we look around us for cues, and if a lot of people are doing something, we assume that must be the correct thing. So if these strangers I invited believe that everyone else was saying yes to me and everyone else was having lunch with me, I think you're right. I think that would make them more likely to say yes.
I mean, they do it in even crazy scientific psychological experiments where they have people sitting in a chair and telling people we're going to turn up the voltage here on them, and they see other people turning up the voltage and they say, look, they did it, you know, everybody's doing it, it's not like it's not really going to hurt them, and they watch the person going, you know, getting jolted all over the place, and it's not attached to electricity, thank God, but the actor acts it out, and people do amazing things because they think it's okay to do what other people are doing.
Yes, this is one of the interesting things about humans. If everyone else is doing it, we think it must be okay. And if there's a trusted authority figure telling us to do something, we think it's something we should do, even if we maybe have some doubts inside.
So maybe after 200, you could start to like just an idea to see within the statistics of what you're getting, how does the scope change when you're able to say, boy, I've had over 200 lunches with people. These lunches are turning out great. I don't want to sway you one way or another. I'm a stranger. You're a stranger. If you feel to come, let's have lunch together and just see what happens if more people sign up, because 95% no is not a good percentage,
Mm.
right? By anybody's standard, you must love having being rejected, right? But I love what you're doing. It's fabulous.
Yeah, I'm seeing these rejections as a blessing in disguise. I've reframed the idea in my mind because it means that the people I'm meeting are really the high value people.
Yeah. And yet we're not 100% sure of that. We only know, like I have in every single case, no matter how distant somebody was from what I believed in my 50 conversations, we've all found something that we really are similar in. And I can't tell if that's because they see something in my invitation, they see a picture of me, they Google me, they find me, and they think I'm okay, or the other people don't think I'm okay. Like I would love to be able to run this blind test and see why do people really say yes? Because in the world we live in, there are some people that will say they're called early adapters. Those are the people that go, something new comes out, they say, yeah, I got to do it. And there's some people that are late adapters that the only reason they have a cell phone is because they can't find a dial-up phone anywhere around anymore, right? um, and so somewhere in between there is where the whole momentum of the world shifts. And I know one of the reasons why I'm doing it is I want to see what will it take for us to get off the sides and come to the middle, because the sides are only going to cause us havoc.
I think the things that unite us are greater than the things that divide us, but we can take those things that unite us for granted, and that makes us focus on the things that divide us. And the more times we focus, the more energy and time we spend on the things that divide us,
Yeah,
the more divided we all get and the more divided we feel.
100%. And that's why I loved what you're doing. By when you sit down and have lunch with someone, it's hard to walk away divided,
It
right?
is.
And it's such a beautiful, simple thing that everybody can. Every I met a homeless guy, and I said to him, "You're watching people walk by you all day, all night. What's one thing you wish you could say to them?" And he said, without even skipping a beat, he said, "I wish I could tell them if they would only take 10 minutes out of the course of their entire life and just go up to somebody and ask them, 'How are you?' How much it might mean to that person." And I said to him, "Why that of all things?" He said, "Well, being a homeless person is not an easy job, Danny. And this day was particularly bad. People would walk by me, they would punch me, they would kick me, they would spit on me. One guy even urinated on me. Somebody stole my money. We're running out of time, so we got to wrap up. One guy even stole my money. And I just decided I'm not serving anybody. I'm not serving any purpose. I'm not doing anything good. I'm not serving anybody. I'm going to go around the corner tonight when it's dark and take my life." And not 2 minutes after I did that, I thought that, somebody came and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "How are you doing, brother?" And I said, "Not too well." And tears came down my eyes. And he just sat down with me and held me. And he said, "Danny, it only took about 10 minutes with that guy just being with me that I realized I couldn't kill myself anymore. Someone stopped in the course of their day and the importance of what they're doing to care about me enough to ask me how I'm doing. And he said, that guy doesn't know that that day he saved my life. And Corey, the man who told me this story, doesn't know that every podcast that I'm on, every talk that I give, every workshop that I deliver, every conference that I go to and speak at, everything that where I'm somewhere where I can speak, I tell Corey's story. I think it's called the butterfly effect of
Yeah.
what would happen if we just took 10 minutes out of the course of our life and just listened to somebody else. And so you can imagine when I heard what you were doing, I just said, I got to meet this guy. I got to have him on. What's do you wish you would have done that you didn't do before? Knowing what you know now, is there anything you wish you would have done when you initiated it?
Uh, there's nothing I would have changed about the lunches, Danny, but there is something I would have changed about my life. So one of the things I've learned from these lunches, it's really sharpened my mindset. I've learned that you've got to be more proactive in life and you've got to ask for more things. And the worst that can happen is someone says no, but it never hurts to ask. And as I've discovered, it's surprising how many times people say yes, even to questions you don't possibly think they would say yes to. So I wish I'd had this mindset when I was younger. I would have done more things. I would have been much further ahead in my life goals than I am. I would have been more successful. I would have had more amazing experiences. I would have had a better network. I would have met even more and higher value people. I wish 20 years ago I had this mindset of just being proactive and getting out there and asking for things.
So now that you know that, what's one thing you would like to do that you would never have thought you could do before?
That is a good question. That is a very good question. I don't know. There's got to be something. But to give you an idea, I remember maybe 6 or 7 months ago, while I was waiting for my 35th lunch companion to arrive, I saw on a table near me one of the most famous people in Australia, a man named Adam Goodes, and I just walked up to him and I asked him if he wanted to have lunch with me, which the old Nick wouldn't have done, but I've learned it never hurts to ask. So now, as it turned out, Adam Goodes said no, but it never hurts to ask, Danny. And I'm sure there'll be situations in my life from now on where I see an opportunity like that and I'm just going to ask for it. Whereas before, I either wouldn't have had the nerve to ask, or more likely, it never would have occurred to me to ask.
Nick, is this the world that you always dreamed that you would hand over to your children and your children's children?
That's also an interesting question, Danny. I don't know how to answer that because I'm not a philosophical person, and I love to read, but I'm not a big thinker. I don't really think of these big ideas, especially these sorts of philosophical ideas. So I don't know, but I wonder maybe I should spend more time thinking about questions like that.
No reason to. I Do you see the world moving in a direction that feels right or feels wrong?
I think the trend is generally positive, but there's a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of violence, war, discrimination, rape, murder. There's so many horrible things happening in the world. And the news is full of all these horrible things because that's what the news is. And because you get all this negativity day after day after day, I think it's easy to miss the progress that we're making, all the
Yes.
advances in science. I think it's easy to forget that we're becoming a better race of people, little bit by little bit. I think we're broadly moving in the right direction, but I do recognize that there are a lot of bad things happening in the world.
So if there were one thing you could suggest to people today that they could start doing today or tomorrow, depending on what time they listen to this, that might move people away from some of the bad things that happen into doing some more good things, what would be one thing you would suggest?
Now that's an easy question for me to answer, Danny. The one thing I've really learned on this journey, meeting all these strangers, is listen. I've become a much better listener. And I think if all of us were to listen to other people, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but once you start seeing things from another person's perspective, you realize that a lot of the snap judgments you make about people are wrong. And I think it makes you a calmer and more mature and more intelligent person.
When I open up a division of the Mosaic in Australia, you are my man, because I couldn't have said that any better. It's one of the things that I'm finding now more than ever also. Nick, we're going to have your information in the show notes, but can you tell people in general, if they want to get in touch with you, how they would do that?
I would love people to get in touch, Danny. There are a couple of ways I recommend. One, they can send me an email, nick@hunterandscribe.com, or they can connect with me on LinkedIn, Nick Bendel.
Fabulous. Nick, I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank those of you who listen to the Mosaic podcast for listening. This man is one of my heroes. He never knew it, but I just thought, why not get to know him and tell him that he's one of my heroes, that he's doing what I always dreamed of doing, which is sitting and just being with people and listening to people. And so much so he inspired me to find a virtual way to do it myself. What he said towards the end is so radically simple. Doesn't mean it's easy. What would it take for you to just start to listen to people a little bit more? What would it take for you to go into your workplace and ask the people that are sweeping the floors what they think of the work that you're doing? Ask the people that are bringing you lunch. Ask the people that are driving you to your appointments. Ask the people on the front lines making the product. Ask the people that are manufacturing your services or your PR, to listen to people's points of view, because one of the things the Mosaic shows me is no matter what a piece looks like, no matter what perspective it has, it's made up of all these different perspectives, all these different colors, all these shapes, all these sizes, some broken, some whole. And what would happen if we ended up just listening? We have less than a minute left, so I just want to thank you, Nick, again. Is there anything quickly you want to say just as a parting shot?
Danny, I would just say thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to chat to you. I really feel so much love and warmth and wisdom and generosity of spirit coming from you. So I really enjoyed it.
Mirror right back to you, brother. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening. Until next time, listen to this, get in touch with Nick, go to his website. Who knows? Call him up and say, I'm ready to have lunch with you. You never know what you might find. Have a great day. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for being a part of this. And thank you for showing up at the Mosaic podcast. Until later, stay connected.